Sometimes police officers know that their actions violate established policies. However, instead of bearing the full consequences of their misconduct, they would instead plant incriminating evidence on citizens so that they could shift the blame on those citizens. That was the summary of the unfortunate encounter between black man Walter Scott and Officer Michael Slager of the North Charleston Police Department. Before encountering Slager, Scott had 4 children and was engaged. He had also served 2 years in the U.S. Coast Guard before being honorably discharged. Sadly, 50-year-old Scott was unfortunate enough to meet Officer Slager around 9:30 a.m. on April 4th, 2015. On that fateful day, Officer Slager pulled over Scott in the parking lot of an auto parts store for an alleged non-functioning brake light. Upon approach, Slager spoke with Scott and then tried to return to his patrol car, probably to check Scott's record. As the officer walked away, Scott exited his car and tried to flee. The officer immediately started chasing him on foot. When the officer caught up with Scott, the two became involved in a physical altercation. Slager fired his taser during the altercation, but it failed in the process.
I approached to the scene when I see, that the police was pushing him, tasering him.
So you saw the police tase him?
Yeah.
Scott then started running away. This time, Slager did the unthinkable. Instead of pursuing and restraining Scott, he drew his firearm and fired 8 shots at Scott from behind. A coroner's report later confirmed that Scott was struck with 5 bullets. 3 struck his back, 1 hit the upper buttocks, and a 5th hit the ear. One of the bullets that struck the back hit Scott's heart and lungs. After the gunshots, Slager radioed to the dispatcher and stated, quote, "Shots fired, subject is down, he grabbed my taser." Also in his police report, Slager claimed that he feared for his life because Scott had taken his taser, and that he shot Scott because he, quote, "felt threatened." However, as seen in the video recorded by Fiden Santana, the person who witnessed the whole incident, Officer Slager lied to the dispatcher, and his claims in the report were false. When Slager started firing the shots, Scott was approximately 15 to 20 feet away and fleeing. The officer just decided not to chase him and started firing instead. The final gunshot sent Scott falling face down about 30 feet away. The officer slowly walked towards Scott and ordered him to put his hands behind his back. Scott seemed unconscious, which made the officer pull his arms to the back and cuff him. Slager then walked briskly back to where he fired the shots, picked up the taser that fell to the ground, and then returned to Scott's body. He then carefully dropped the taser near Scott's feet in the presence of a responding officer, later identified as Clarence Habersham. One reason Slager confidently planted the evidence was that this incident happened when officers of the North Charleston Police Department had not yet started using body cameras. The officer also seemed confident that Officer Habersham would support him, even if he saw him planting the evidence. Unfortunately for them, Fiden Santana, the passerby who witnessed this horrible incident, documented everything by recording it on his phone. If Santana weren't around, the story of this encounter would most likely have gone in the officer's favor. Initially, Santana did not want to share the video out of fear of retribution. In an interview with MSNBC, he said, quote,
I even thought about erasing the video, and
Why?
I felt that my life, with this information might be, like I say, in danger. And I tried I thought about erasing the video and just getting out of the community of North Charleston, and leaving someplace else.
Leaving town?
Yes.
Because you were that scared?
Yeah.
However, Santana shared the video after he was angered due to the police report that told a different story to what he witnessed. Before the video was shared, attorney David Eiler was eager to support Officer Slager in any legal battle. However, within hours of the video's release, he withdrew all his support without giving any reason. On April 7th, 2015, Slager was arrested and charged with murder after his department reviewed the video. On April 8th, 2015, Mayor Keith Summey, one of the city's officials, announced that Slager's contract with the police department had been terminated. However, the city will continue to cover his insurance until his wife, who was 8 months pregnant by then, gave birth to their baby. Summey also said that the city had received a grant to order 101 body cameras, and that he had ordered an additional 150 cameras that their police officers would be trained to start using while carrying out their official duties. On June 8, 2015, a South Carolina grand jury indicted Slager on a murder charge, the only criminal charge presented. On January 4th, 2016, after being held without bail for almost 9 months, Slager was released on a $500,000 bond and confined to house arrest. After many other court trials, on December 7th, 2017, U.S. District Judge David Norton sentenced Slager to 20 years in prison. The judge agreed with prosecutors that the offense was second-degree murder, contrary to the voluntary manslaughter that was argued by Slager's attorneys. Due to the court rulings, Slager is not qualified for parole and will likely remain in prison for about 18 years. His earliest possible release is mid-August of 2032. All his appeals for reduction of the sentence have been denied. Scott's family filed a lawsuit against the city of North Charleston, citing wrongful death and a civil rights violation. In October of 2015, an out-of-court settlement was reached, and the city agreed to pay $6.5 million to the family. Number 2, Zachary Wester. Anyone found with illegal drugs and unauthorized controlled substances in Florida usually gets high fines and can also spend from a few months to years in prison, depending on the severity of the drug crime. But do you know that not all people currently serving jail time in Florida for drug crimes actually committed the crime? Thanks to corrupt deputies like Zachary Wester of the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, many innocent citizens have been imprisoned for drug crimes that they knew nothing about. Wester was hired by Jackson County in May of 2016, having previously worked for less than a year as a deputy with the Liberty County Sheriff's Office. While on duty, Wester would often turn off his body camera before miraculously locating illegal drugs. Other times, he only turned on his body camera after drugs were located. Wester finally met his Waterloo after an internal investigation raised concerns surrounding his work. He was fired, and Jackson County Sheriff Lou Roberts asked state authorities to investigate Wester independently. Investigations concerning Wester's misconduct began in August of 2018. During the investigation, agents of the Florida Department of Law Enforcement analyzed more than 1,300 minutes of recorded video and logged over 1,400 working hours on the investigation. The agents saw that Wester routinely pulled over citizens for alleged minor traffic infractions. He would then plant drugs inside their vehicles and arrest them on fabricated drug charges. They also observed that Wester regularly circumvented his body camera and tailored his recordings to conceal his criminal activity. The investigators also found 42 items of drug paraphernalia in Wester's car, as well as 10 separately packaged quantities of methamphetamines and 5 separately packaged quantities of marijuana. In addition, 11 people testified that Wester planted drugs on them. Most of the victims were locals, and it does not appear that Wester was targeting a specific group. This corrupt deputy made more than 100 arrests during his time with Jackson County, although the investigators did not believe that every one of those was a false arrest or that he planted drugs on everyone. However, the investigator found that Wester planted methamphetamine and drug paraphernalia in the vehicles of a dozen innocent motorists during his traffic stops in 2017 and 2018. Chris Williams, a special agent in charge of the investigation, commented concerning the investigation, quote, "There is no question that Wester's crimes were deliberate and that his actions put innocent people in jail." Based on the investigators' evidence, Wester was arrested in July of 2019 and booked into the Wakulla County Jail. He was held without bond. On May 18, 2021, after a week-long trial that began on May 10th, Wester was found guilty of 19 out of the 67 charges brought against him. He was cleared of the other 48 counts. On July 13, 2021, Wester was sentenced to 12 years, 6 months, and 8 days in state prison. Jackson County Judge James Goodman denied the defense's motion to allow Wester to be released from custody pending appeal. The judge said Wester was not a flight risk, and case law could afford him bond on the racketeering conviction, but there are 18 other counts for which he was being sentenced. And finally, number 3, Kyle Erickson and Elmer Pastran. The New York City Police Department has a long history of having corrupt personnel among its officers. For example, between 1975 and 1996, 1,543 officers were either dismissed, terminated or forced to resign or retire from the NYPD for reasons of misconduct. It seems that the misconduct of NYPD officers has continued into the 21st century, as we will see in the case of Officer Kyle Erickson and Officer Elmer Pastran. In two separate incidents in 2018, these two Staten Island cops were caught on video planning drugs on innocent citizens during traffic stops. In the first case, around noon on February 28, 2018, Officer Erickson and Officer Pastran pulled over a black teen named Lasu Kuyate. Kuyate was driving with three of his friends. The officers alleged that the traffic stop was due to the illegally tinted windows and that the driver had failed to signal before turning. During interrogation, the officer said the car smelled like marijuana. One of the passengers then admitted to smoking weed before the traffic stop. Based on that, the officers searched all four men and the car. Because they didn't find anything incriminating, the officers weren't happy with that. In fact, Officer Erickson was furious that he couldn't find any contraband on Kuyate, whom he believed to be a gang member. Erickson told his colleague, quote, "We gotta find it. We have to find something. You know what I mean?" After making that statement, Erickson's body camera turned off, and the camera was not turned on again for nearly 5 minutes. However, Erickson was sometimes visible on Pastran's body camera. At one point, Erickson was seen fiddling with something behind the driver's seat. He also leaned into the back left passenger seat of the car and placed an object, later identified as marijuana, on the seat before wiping his hands. Kuyate, who was observing the officers, saw what happened and became very angry that the officers had put something in his car. He was then prevented from filming the incident and subsequently handcuffed. It should be noted that the area where the marijuana was allegedly found had been repeatedly searched by both officers and deemed all clear by Pastran minutes earlier. Kuyate was eventually arrested for that weed and jailed for 2 weeks because he couldn't meet his $1,000 bail. During a court trial where Kuyate's attorney challenged the suspicious video, Judge Christopher Robles abruptly stopped the hearing. The following day, the Staten Island DA's office dismissed and sealed the case with no further explanation from prosecutors or the judge. Even more shocking, the NYPD conducted their alleged thorough investigation and concluded that both officers committed no wrongdoing. According to Philip Walsack, NYPD spokesperson, there was, quote, "no evidence that the officers conducted anything but a lawful stop, performed a consensual search, and had probable cause to arrest the defendant." In another incident of planting incriminating evidence on innocent citizens, a guy named Jason Serrano had an unfortunate encounter with these same officers. Around 7 p.m. on March 13, 2018, just 2 weeks after the incident with Kuyate, Serrano was a passenger in his friend's vehicle when Officer Erickson and Officer Pastran pulled them over. The officers alleged that the traffic stop was due to the broken taillight of the vehicle. However, during interrogation, they alleged that they perceived the odor of marijuana emitting from the vehicle. Due to that, the officers told Serrano and the female driver to step out of the car so that they could search the vehicle. The driver stepped out without any incident. However, as Serrano stepped out, he took his jacket with him. The officers weren't happy with that and told him to leave the jacket in the vehicle. Serrano, who was still recovering from an abdominal wound, refused. That resulted in a physical altercation between him and the two officers. After placing him under their control, more officers arrived and the vehicle was thoroughly searched. No trace of marijuana was found. The two officers seemed frustrated that their altercation with Serrano would not result in a drug charge. Officer Erickson was heard saying, quote, "We gotta find something." Moments later, he placed loose weed in the cup holder. They also miraculously found some weed in Serrano's jacket. Even more shocking, when the officers entered their patrol vehicle, Erickson's body camera showed what appeared to be chunks of weed on the floorboard of the NYPD vehicle. He asked his colleague, quote, "Are we to hold on to these?" They then turned off their cameras. Serrano was arrested and charged with resisting arrest, obstructing governmental administration, possession of marijuana, and possession of another controlled substance. 3 months after his arrest, he took a plea deal for resisting arrest to avoid pre-trial detention because he couldn't afford the $500 bail. The other charges were dismissed. As of that time, he had no idea that there was a video proving his innocence. In October of 2021, Judge Tamiko Amakar of Staten Island vacated Serrano's conviction after carefully reviewing the body camera footage. The judge also cited the disciplinary records of Kyle Erickson and Elmer Pastran. Well, that's all concerning this video. What is your opinion concerning these corrupt officers? Do you know of other similar cases of police officers planting incriminating evidence on citizens? Please share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. And as always, thanks for watching.